Right, hi there, everyone. It's James from Barnsley Send. Just a quick introduction. I've been involved with education now for just over 20 years in and around the Send sector, working with young people with special educational needs, social, emotional, mental health, and complex behaviours. And if you follow our page, we've recently just been discussing the last DFE funded parent forum, and I'm quite pleased to say that we've got Jonathan here with us. Obviously, he's featured quite heavily. So I just wanted to, if you could just introduce yourself, please, Jonathan, for everybody.
Of course, James. Yeah, I similar to you, I got a background in special educational needs as a teacher within post 16 education. And as with you, which I'm not sure if you mentioned, which is a sign of how genuine you are, is you are from to the father of a child with special educational needs as
Yes,
well.
I am. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've got two
And
boys. Yeah, both autistic. Yeah,
I think we both sometimes, or perhaps sometimes people forget that that's why we're doing it. That's
yeah.
the. But anyway, yeah. So at the really way to get started, I suppose, is I left education because my son was diagnosed, and then inadvertently I stumbled into what were then called just parental engagement, really. And I'm not saying I invented it, not by any stretch of margin, but I were adamant that it needed to be called parental voice in Barnsley, not in
Right.
Barnsley, just parental voice, because it had to be specific, not just family voice, because we obviously
When you say parental voice, what? Just give me an overview. Obviously, I'm aware what you're talking, but what do you class as parental voice when
Well,
it comes to the
I think
sense
I think
sector?
the easiest way to describe it is a way that I created a model which looked at it in three stages parental voice. So obviously it's the parent of a child with special educational needs and disability, and by law, that parent, those parents of those children, along with the children themselves, should have influence over the services that deliver services to them. And the way that I saw it almost immediately, it were a three-pronged approach. And that was there was the individual, what we call co-production, where we're trying to design our own EHCP, or back then when I started a statement, and you're trying to talk with services. And that's a form of co-production. You're creating out
Okay.
to
Yeah,
create
yeah.
better outcomes for your child. Then there was organizational co-production, which kind of looked more at a service. So a service might contact you and say, "Can you come and help us? We've got some new ideas, or we want some new ideas." A really good example of that is Sendias within our town. They have an SMG built
Yeah,
into
yeah,
their
yeah.
structure. Parents are involved, and they have conversations about the future, the service, and so on. And then the third area of parental voice comes under strategic co-production, whereby it's not linked directly to a particular service area. What it's linked to is the overall outlook of what's called a local area, which involves your education system, your health system, and your care system or your social care system. And it looks how you try to bring those three things together at a strategic level. And what the argument is, or what the suggestion was through the 2015 code of practice, were that some of the best people equipped to help that direction of travel are the people who are going to have a lifetime of care, people who are going to be
Yeah, yeah,
looking after the
absolutely.
children.
Yeah.
And
And I think
so,
that's important. That's a fundamental pillar as well in it of the same code of practice.
absolutely,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's none of this is to detract from the young person or child voice, none of that. But
yeah,
as you may or may not experience, I certainly my child, my young person now as he is, he can't articulate that voice. So in a lot of
yeah,
ways, I've got to analyze what he wants and what he needs, and be his voice as well.
yes,
So
yeah,
there is that. But I would emphasize that it's really important, where possible, to get the child and young person to to sort of create a pathway for our services as shared. But parents and family members, carers, whichever category you fall under, are an absolute cog in that wheel.
yes, yeah. So you were the leader of the DFE funded forum. Um, Again, obviously working on. I've got an idea what the forum is, but just explain to just explain to our the listeners what a forum is. What is a what is the forum?
In simple terms, it is a group of parents slash carers. I always recognise carers as not there, but I'm just going to
Yes,
use the
yeah,
word
absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah.
parents. It's a group of parents who become formed under what is referred to as a governance and transparent structure. So they
Yeah,
become governance, a group of parents. And basically, layman's term, governance means rules. And what
yeah,
they do is they come together as a group and via a DFE, the Department for Education charity, which is Contact, a group of parents in every local applied for the Parent Care Forum grant, which at present is £70,000 per annum. Not a lot of money, sounds like. And those parents fundamentally would take that role on to create what's called a steering group. So that would be anything generally 6 and 12 parents
right, okay.
who the lion's share of the terms of attending meetings and checking and challenging the local authority and the ICB as it is now, the Care Board, for now. And those basically localized services. So what it would be is a parents that then promoted into a strategic development system whereby
Yeah,
local area services have someone who's a go-to, then they then access information from parents. The
okay.
problem, the biggest part of it is, which is for me most moral and important part is a lot of people said that a forum represents parents, but my sticking mud type comment is you should be there to present parents. So what I
Right,
mean by that is if you get obsessed with thinking that you are reputational, then you're failing already. What
right, okay.
you should be taking as much data, whether that's hard data, soft data, conversational, videos, whatever, and presenting that data in a in a format will allow strategic on service. So
Right.
that's the philosophical idea behind it. Practical point of view is that there's anywhere between 5 and 12 parents that sit on a steering um, and support local authorities, but also check and challenge them. That's really
Yeah.
important.
So it's fair to say, I know obviously you've spent some time around the Barnsley local authority. So you just kind of talk me through what was happening previously before obviously you came in as the DFE funded forum. What was happening with Barnes? Because I've been trying to grapple and try and find. I've been trying to figure out and find out. We hear a lot of talk now about the SEN crisis, and we hear a lot of issues around financing in the local authority in Barnsley. We see services that are kind of struggling. Um, kind of, can you kind of paint an overall picture of what you've kind of seen from kind of inception of parental voice, for argument's sake, through to the point when you took over as the of the chair of the DFE funded forum? How so
Yeah.
time scale and what you kind of see the good, the bad, the ugly.
But the code of practice changed in 2015 post the Children and Families Act. And prior to that, parent care forums had just started funding through a funding pot aiming higher. And they were considered to be really successful. And there was a lot of really good work done. Now, what I would say is nationally, um, Barnsley was recognised as having a really good local parent care forum in the first instance.
All right. Okay.
It
Right. Yeah.
was it was recognised and it was lauded upon and seen. And I know this person won't mind me mentioning, but actually back then the manager of Sendia, Sarah, was again at that point was seconded to create the very first forum, okay, through the aiming higher funding. And the
Yeah.
group of parents that were involved were known and respected and different. And people had different opinions, but they were a good,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I would call smorgasbord of parents. So that's how we were first funded, doing well. But then for one reason or another, we are getting into the politics of it. It started to fall apart, and the two people that chaired it at that time decided to step away. And then when I joined, basically because I was finding out that my son was disabled, I
Yes.
walked through the doors, and the forum that had basically already had its heyday, and we were trying to resuscitate it really, and we're not much left to do. There were no
Yeah, yeah,
communication, no relationship. So we had about 6 months where I was trying to help with some of the background I had and get to know it. And then within 6 to 7 months, the forum collapsed. And so from that point on, around 2015, 2016, certainly mid 2015, for no forum. And in the 10 years of the Send Code of Practice being in Barnsley, we've had an active forum for less than 2 years.
right. Okay. Right.
When you consider the other
Yeah,
areas, we've
yeah,
had
yeah.
forums for 10 years.
How
Um,
how does that correlate as well? Do you know with the because obviously we represent a number of families now, quite a lot of families to be fair, within the Barnsley area, who feel like they're forgotten, who have struggled when it comes to kind of getting things like EHCPs in place. How does that not having that parent voice in that forum kind of
oh, it's massive.
correlate with the sliding services or the improvement of services? Or what's your impression?
Great question, and it is absolutely pertinent to everything. So people think someone like myself who is, I'm just really into the strategic level for production, okay, which is
Yeah, 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 yeah.
co-production being that the family is the context, the story, and then and then the services are the process, the people who
Yes,
process
yeah,
the
yeah,
stories
yeah.
into services. And when you look at it at strategic level, it's got to be top down, not bottom up, right?
Right.
So you've got to be
Okay.
at strategic level. You've got to have your executive leaders and your elected leaders completely valuing and underpinning that at the most strategic level, their expectations for co-production with families at strategic level is there. It's transparent, it's questionable, it's governance, and they will check and challenge their workers, their managers, service directors, and so on. So if we go a top down, that culture's created, and then what we start looking at is we're saying when we look at the system that I talked about, which is a triad of corruption,
Yeah.
you go down to the organizational stuff. You should be able to see the strategic culture reflected in the organizational stuff. So if you go to CAMS or you go to EHCP team or you go to Sendias or whatever, you should be able to say, well, actually, I don't like the way that this service is delivered. And I know that my strategic service managers, the executive leaders and elected members will hold them accountable. So there's that top
Yes.
down
Yeah, yeah,
process.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we go a step further that if we're not having that accountability at strategic level, 8 out of 10 years we're out of for it. There's no accountability or very little at organizational level. And then at individual level, how are you going to get across your voice in your child's voice into an EHCP or through SEN support or in CAMS when you know that there's nobody to go to above will crack the whip, for want of a better word.
Yeah,
What we
yeah,
have a
yeah.
culture of is we start trying to do co-production in this town from bottom up. And you can't do it because it's just participation because there's nobody
Yeah.
backing you right at the top.
Yeah. Them core values not flowing through. It doesn't have that DNA all the way through.
No. And so
Yeah.
when you ask that really pertinent question, which is if you don't have strategic governance voice, how does it affect the whole local area system? It absolutely does because on every level. Because if you are not respected at a pet or you don't feel respected as a parent at strategic level, how on earth are you going to be respected as a parent or a young
Service level.
person or a child at your individual level? It's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, yeah.
So it has to be a top-down process. And even now, when that were identified in the local area inspection in 2021, saying that parent literally said that parents have not had sufficient, not literally said, but not had sufficient or any influence on strategic development, strategic decision.
Yeah.
That was
And
I still
that,
think
that was quite instrumental as well, wasn't it? That was quite a pivotal part of that 2021 send inspection, which led to the written statement of action. I'm correct in stating. So yeah. Do you want to kind of run through what that WSOA kind of was, that written statement of action was, and the implications behind it?
yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm a fair person, and I get a bad rap because I'm working on things that need to improve. There's no point me backslapping and doing thumbs up things that are working.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
there were things in the WSOA that said that things were going well, stuff that was going well. But we're not here to talk about that. What we're here to talk about
yeah,
is what were identified in that WSOA were failed on two key areas. So what it were is the key areas it failed on was a lack of strategic influence from parent voice, from parents,
yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
to shape services and for the local area. And the other one was a very sort of poor level of um, SEN support, partaking in SEN support. So what we had is we had a culture in Barnsley where SEN support was not being used in school. So when you're looking at an individual child, you're basically saying it's a two-tiered system. You start off with SEN support, and then if it progresses, you look at the EHCP system. So it's two-tier. What we were finding in Barnsley, and again, this comes down to trust values. This comes down to accountability. It comes down to a belief. So what parents were doing, and it happens a lot in different areas, is there is no legal structure that surrounds SEN support level. So if
Right.
someone says, we're going to give you a TA for that lesson, they can take that away. There's no legal framework that means that that's going to stay. So what parents are naturally going to do, what family members are naturally going to do to look after their little Johnny, is they're going to seek a level of support that has got a legal framework wrapped around it, which is the HCP process.
Yes. Yeah,
But,
yeah, absolutely.
but what they highlighted is that SEN support in our schools and across our borough was poor, uptake was poor. And that was because SEN support wasn't being done correctly. So people then naturally just thought, forget this for a bag of chips. I'm going for something that's I can hold people accountable. And again, it's
Yeah,
that A word. It's that A word. So in terms of the WSOA, two main areas that failed on was a lack of parental voice and a lack of SEN support. What we did is we presented here at the consultant team, good friend of mine, and we identified the absolute connection between a lack of strategic confidence in strategic decision making and a lack of uptake in SEN support. Because if you don't feel as though you can influence at the most strategic level of the three
yeah, yeah,
areas,
yeah.
then you're not going to have confidence in the SEN support level, which is the first part of co-production. First part of the individual co-production is between a parent and school. Okay? A
Yes.
parent
Yeah,
and a school.
absolutely.
And there's a little bit of nudging needed. That's when your local authority should come up and say, where can we help? We're advocates for these children with special needs. We're here to play the ombudsman. We're here to play the mediator. But what we're
Yeah.
finding in our local authority, in our local area, is it's people don't. There's none of that mediation. There's none of that natural mediation, and we jump to then using an organisation like Sendia, which then is about the law. People making it, it's
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is,
yeah.
and then you start getting that. And what you do then is you get adversarial, not through Sendia. Sendias are trying to de-adversarialize the system. They're trying, and then yourselves, you're going in meetings now to try to remove that adversarial bone
Yes,
on bone.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you're trying to be the
yeah,
ligament and muscle between it that makes the joint work properly, rather than it
yeah.
being bone on bone. Because that's when it falls apart. That's when it breaks down. When it's bone on bone.
Yes, absolutely.
But that lack of trust in SEN support is a mirroring of it not happening, the co-production not happening from the top down.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we see a lot of cases where we're kind of going in. I think again, which is a very big indicator of this kind of lack of top down, is the lack of understanding of SEND support and what SEND support is. We see a lot of SEND support becoming all of a sudden focused around attendance and getting that child back into school when the fundamental pillars of creating that safe place for that child are not there. And that's got to come from somewhere. So when you kind of obviously when you set the forum, just kind of talk about when the forum, when the DFE funded forum started. Let's have a kind of draw right
So
back to
it
that
would
point in time.
it would be remiss of me to not mention the fact that because um, I've campaigned, and I think I've got a real bugbear with this is that if someone's endorsed by a political leader, or if someone's endorsed by something that's perceived to be righteous, in whoever's
Yes.
eyes you can be called a campaigner and celebrate
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you look at other areas of life where people campaigning for this, they're campaigning for changes on it. They use that word freely and it's seen fundamentally as a positive side. When you become a send parent, you're campaigning for things. You're mad with this this brush of he's a trouble
Absolutely.
caller or she's a
Yeah.
trouble caller, right?
Serial complainer. Yeah.
Serial
Yeah.
complainer,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
vexatious, whatever word you want to use.
Yes. Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
but if it's to change, Windrush, which is a wonderful cause that's taken place, or you look at the post office, they were demons. A documentary makes
Yes.
a film gets made, and now they're heroes. And this is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
like, depending on which way the wind's blowing and who's deciding, that word campaigning either means you devil incarnate or you're Robin Hood, you know. And
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's important for me to know that I campaigned and I asked questions and we had to take to social media because there were no other avenue. Um,
And
so
it's fair to
when
say, as an organisation, we've been there as well. We've just recently been hit with that very large brush by the
yeah,
local
yeah,
authority,
well,
which is
well,
absolutely crackers when you
that's
think
not an
about it. Yeah.
elephant in your room and my room, I think it's it.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. So we've been part of that toxic environment, and I think sometimes it's kind of understanding what that kind of means, and then what the positive environment and them outcomes mean. It's kind of they mean two totally different things for two totally different groups of people. So
Well,
yeah,
they do. So, from my perspective, I'd spent when the forum wasn't there, I'd spent the time campaigning and asking for the right type of parent voice.
yeah,
I've never really believed in the original forum system, which I'm not going to get into too much detail about, but it's a bit archaic. It's a bit formulaic, and it's not very open. But that aside, um, what was almost I became effectively poacher turned gamekeeper,
right, okay,
right? So our campaigner, some individuals were trying to mar my reputation,
yes,
but and I don't want to get myself into trouble here, and I never want to. I don't want to target parents. Parents are only your parents' behaviors. All of us are, are led by your relationship with your local area services.
yes,
You know,
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
it would be easy for parents do fall out. I've fallen out with lots of parents. Lots of parents have fallen out with me. But perception is perception versus perspectives, and that's a really
yes,
important way of looking at
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah,
But at the heart of it all, I've never met a parent who doesn't want to make the services better, even if it's just for their own child. Some people are like that. That's fine, but
yeah, yeah,
doesn't make the services better. So I'm not going to get into this sort of slanging match about parents, but you find the culture of your parents, the toxicity that I believe exists within our local area system at the moment is often created by the way that you are treated or the way that you are suppressed. And I feel the suppression
yes,
is
yes.
creating toxicity in this town. That's
Yeah,
my personal
yeah,
opinion.
and I would agree with that. Yeah, yeah, we see
And
that
that,
on a daily basis. When you see the parents who come and they've been battered down by that complaints process, and we've seen some horrendous things happen where social cares come knocking on door after parents. Yeah, you be kind. it's kind of it's nurture versus nature, and it you become that beast, don't you? You become that person
Yeah.
yeah,
And you know what, James? I've been involved in the SEND system in Barnsley for 10 years now. Well, 12 actually, because my son's 14 and he was diagnosed at 2. And I was as green as Kermit the Frog when I first started.
yeah,
And the reality is this is that in them 12 years I've been absolutely zoning in. Don't get me wrong, things happen and they don't get reported, but I've not seen, touch wood, and I don't want to see anything. I've not seen any reported atrocities or shocking news stories come out of Barnsley about send parents doing anything untoward or bad with their children. It's not like
yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
stories
absolutely,
about
yeah, yeah,
bad
yeah,
places that like Rotherham where stuff's gone on, and a lot of them young people were send children, Solihull, and all those areas. So I don't want to create an impression that Barnsley is a bad place. I don't see it like that. What I see it is that you got a lot of passion, and sometimes I feel as though that passion is trying to be suppressed into a square box. Whereas the code of practice, whether it set unrealistic expectations for the system, which I could argue it did, it was a beautiful piece of law, but we didn't
yeah,
have the resources to deliver it. But by the by, you know, we found that parents have been completely just pounded down across the board, trying to get what they know is their legal right for their child.